So, as a woman, what would you say gets women further in society today? Outer or inner beauty? So, personally, with so much discussion surrounding pretty privilege in today's social media climate, I felt that many would probably answer outer beauty. My personal favorite uh, inspiration for women is actually a biblical one. It's Queen Esther in the Bible. So I'm currently reading the book of Esther, and Esther is the perfect example of a woman who exhibited extreme outward beauty. She was physically beautiful according to the Bible, but she also balanced that with the person she was in her heart, her inner beauty. So I'd say the perfect comparison of the two, um, outer beauty versus inner beauty, and how you could really nurture both, is in the book of Esther, the comparison between the difference between Queen Vashti, the previous queen, to King Ahasuerus, if I'm saying his name correctly, the king in the book of Esther, and Queen Esther, who succeeded Queen Vashti, if I'm saying that correctly. But Queen Vashti, I would say, was dismissed by the king, possibly because of her disposition. He's having this grand banquet and he wants to display and show off his queen's beauty before the men at his banquet, and Queen Vashti refused. She simply refused over and over to come in as he requested. She actually was having her own banquet for the women simultaneously while he was having his banquet. So, long story short, the king and his advisors agreed that it would be appropriate to dismiss Queen Vashti because of, her refusal and rebelling against the king. They didn't want the other women to follow suit and, also not listen to their husbands or whatever in the, according to the local culture and the way things were done in that kingdom and at that time. They felt that other women might rebel as well. So he wanted to find a queen that was more suitable for him because he became enraged at her, I'm guessing embarrassing him and just uh, refusing to come in as he had requested of her. So he had the most beautiful women of all the provinces of his kingdom, most beautiful young women, to come in before him, and they actually had to go through 12 months of beauty treatments before they even saw the king. So they did nurture, that self-care and that outward beauty. They had to go through so much, you know, so many treatments just to even, be in his presence. Now, the Bible says that Esther, she found, like, everyone who even was in her presence found her to be a favorable person. And the king, out of all the women, he found favor in Esther, or she found favor through him, and he was favorable to her. And it says that she was favorable to him, and he found her to be pleasing to him. So he fell in love with Esther, who was queen to be, and he did immediately make her his queen. It states that he had loyal love for her. So just the fact that how it's worded, that she was pleasing and she found favor with the king, I don't believe that it's speaking just directly to only her physical beauty. I believe that it was the qualities of her personality, that the Bible is speaking of, that made her well liked by all, and for the king to fall in love with her. So it was not only her outward beauty, but also her inner beauty that made her attractive. And why I love this story of Esther is because, yes, Esther's physical beauty did help her to elevate into society all the way up to becoming the queen of Persia, I believe it was. But So Vashti, she was also a very beautiful queen, obviously because the previous queen, obviously because the king wanted to display her beauty before the men. At that time, Vashti was only concerned about her personal pursuits, and she was busy with her banquet of the women. Now, Queen Esther, very beautiful story of how the Queen Esther was able to use her status to save her people from annihilation. So her people were, they were trying to annihilate God's people in that account. And she didn't just use her status for selfish pursuits and say, well, no one knows that I'm related to these people. They're going to kill off my people. I'm safe. I'm the queen. She actually used her status in a beautiful way to save her people. So not only, and oh, I was going to mention, like after she became queen, the king had her to undergo even more beauty treatments and to, have focus on her diet, and he just bestowed all of these things, these provisions for Esther. He loved her, he cared for her, he provided for her. Under the counsel of her cousin, who was also her guardian, Mordecai, who was a guard to the king, she did not make mention of where she was from. But when the time came for her to speak up and be a saving grace by the hands of God to save her people, she did not forget where she came from. So the book of Esther really, talks about, it really focuses on, it's a lot of different elements to that story, but I love the self-care that's poured into the women in the book of Esther. But not only was Esther's physical beauty nurtured, she also had to have been nurturing her spiritual health as well. She was beautiful, obviously, spiritually to God because he had her account detailed for our benefit in his word, the Bible. But Esther, she had to be nurturing that relationship with God to be able to have that bravery and that courage to stand up for her people. In effect, she saved her people. God saved her people, but he used Esther because they were God's chosen people at the time. I think Esther is just the perfect example for women today, that it's okay to nurture both. And I know many of us know this, but this society just places so much emphasis on physical traits. It's also important to nurture yourself emotionally. It's also important to nurture your spirituality. It's also important to nurture your mental health, nurture relationships with others. And it is okay also to nurture yourself physically too, and that's where that self-care comes in, and it's so important. But I definitely recommend the book of Esther. It's not even a long read. It's just a few chapters, but it's a very beautiful story. And Esther is definitely will always be an inspiration for women.